Thank you so much, Beatriz, for the very nice and warm presentation. I am very happy and I am very honored to hold the floor with all of you today, right? There's much to be said about how we can tailor the CLIL approach for infant pre-primary education. So I would try to be very brief, right? At the end, as my colleague was pointing out, if you have any questions, if you have some comments that could be treated afterwards, after all my colleagues and myself have exposed our ideas on the topic. Okay, so when I was designing this talk, when I was thinking about how could I introduce a topic, I had a basic idea of trying to set some basic but essential pedagogical principles if we want to bear in mind when we want to adopt the CLIL approach for pre-primary levels, for pre-primary education. So I was trying to connect what I know about bilingual education and what we all know about early childhood education, right? And I wanted to start by having a closer look at early childhood education because I guess this should be our starting point always, right? And as you know, when it comes to early childhood education, we all mean holistic learning, meaningful learning as well, experiential learning, play-based activities so that the learning and the acquisition of the language, if we're talking about the language, becomes meaningful, right? And the basis of early childhood education should always be to build strong foundations for critical social and emotional skills. There's this link between the kids and the parents, which is sometimes forgotten by the institution and the teachers, to be developed in the future, right? So as you already know, and as you can imagine, this is much more than learning basic skills so that we can prepare pre-primary kids for primary and secondary and the long-term future. It takes more than literacy and numeracy and all that, okay? Maybe when you had a look at this first slide, you also were missing something in this acronym, yeah? Because we usually tend to talk about early childhood education along with care, right? And this is something I wanted to treat separately in my talk today, in my presentation. Why this care? Because as I was pointing out before, it takes much more than learning about numbers, about languages, about experiments, about social life, but it has to be treated with very much care because we're treating with kids which are at a pre-literate stage, and they need to be treated with affection and with lots of respect. Yeah, we will deal with this respect later on in my presentation, and it will be translated to how it can contribute to successful learning environments and also successful bilingual education, everything together. Okay. And then, on the other hand, we had early bilingual education on the focus of the idea when we think about early bilingual education is, according to the Council of Europe, as you know, is to ensure language is effective, key attitudes towards other languages and cultures are formed, and solid, very solid foundations for later language learning are laid. Okay? And how early childhood education and care can connect with CLIL, because you already know that CLIL is much more than nursery rhymes, is much more than teaching in English. There's all misconceptions that we are trying to forget in the long term, and how can they be connected when we think about both terms? Well, first, if we think about CLIL, it is clear that CLIL promotes experimentation in the environment, independence, and self-education, which is as well connected with early childhood education and care, experiential learning. It is also focused on children's centers of interest, which is, on our part, connected with meaningful learning in early childhood education. Third, it improves second language or foreign language or additional languages, if you prefer that term, in an integrated way, as well as it prepares not just for primary, but also for holistic learning in the long term, which is one of the key foundations of ECE, right? And finally, CLIL has been demonstrated to be a motivational approach which promotes both creativity and play-based active learning. I mean, it's much more than mere production and repetition of sentences and rhymes and songs and videos, but it promotes creativity in a different way so that it is connected with play-based, meaningful, active learning as well. Okay? So in words of the founders of CLIL, CLIL is not about the transfer of knowledge from an expert, which would be the teacher, to a novice, which would be the kid, very young learners, but it is also about allowing individuals to build, to construct their own understandings and be challenged to do things with the content, with the areas better than content that they are absorbing, that they're working with. Okay. Up to this point, we missed this C about care. Why is this C in early childhood education and care important? Because it is connected with respect. Why is respect important? It is very much important, of course, in infant education, for pre-primary education, but it is also very important when it comes to CLIL, because otherwise we would be overburdening students with the weight of the language plus the weight of the areas, the experiential areas they're gonna to develop in the future. So if we are not respecting children's development, that stage, if we don't recognize they are at this preliterate stage from 0 to 6, 7 years old, this could be very, this could negatively affect what we already know about the affective filter. The affective filter, as you may know, is like a psychological fence. And if we don't care about the psychological fence, it could be counterproductive, because we could be damaging students or very young learners, in this case, kids' affections and how they feel about learners and how they feel about talkers and about talking the language forever. So we need to be very careful and have this C for care into account, okay? Otherwise, it could be counterproductive. What are these developmental issues that we need to take into account when we have this C in mind? But misconceptions about the critical period hypothesis, yeah, we be very careful about thinking that the earlier is always the better, because we need to set some strong and solid foundations, and we need to do things right. Right? It's not just because they're very young. It is because they're gonna learn the language better or easier. Right? Be careful about that. We need to consider as well the silent period. This is a stage where children are exposed to lots of significant and rich input in CLIL or language learning, in traditional foreign language or second language learning, but it does never mean that they should be expected to produce the language themselves. Also remember that the very young learners, between them, there are many differences between those ones who were born in the January, February, and those ones who were later in the academic year. Okay, so the exposure we are offering them in the class, in the educational environment, should be short and very gradual. Although it also should be rich and very meaningful. This is what we traditionally call the language showers. Remember that this pre-operational stage they are immersed in, the abstract thinking that have not been developed at all, and abilities are still represented in artistic, linguistic, and very ludic, very playful moments. Bear in mind the centers of interest, and of course that CLIL is much more than singing in English, than telling stories in English and singing with them, okay? Which are like the basic ideas if we consider about the four traditional, and I say traditional because there are many researchers currently which are thinking about how these traditional forces could be transformed or slightly changed in order to suit the stage they are in. When we think about the content in pre-primary, we do prefer talking about areas of development. Communication is very important, and even if it's considered another area of development in pre-primary education, it should be treated separately, because if not, we might be losing its importance, right? Cognition and the culture. So let's have a quick look at how we can do this with these C's, or nearly C's, because the first C disappeared here, and we have an A already, which is areas of development in CLIL for pre-primary education. When we're talking about the areas, we need a play-based instruction, safe and nurturing play or environment in the class. We need to introduce content, of course, through storytelling, social activities, visual arts, but also with the help of science and technology experiments, STEM, which kids love, right? Because this is something they can manipulate. There's something they can do with their own hands, yeah? When it comes to communication, we need to consider to use parentheses, or at least to change our pace, right? So that we are transforming our interaction and make it more accessible to them. Consider whether to use the first language if necessary in the class. Consider the quality of our input in the class. Have a multiplicity of speakers, yeah, work in combination with other teacher, the tutor, the language assistant, and so on. Consider a phonics-based approach, not just in the second language, but also in the mother tongue. When it comes to cognition, we need to think about moving from what they know towards what they don't know. According to our colleague Soraya Garcia Esteban, we need to move from very familiar language then to familiar content, the new content, and the new language. And finally, culture, which is sometimes very difficult to deal with in some other CLIL contexts, such as not really primary, but maybe secondary. Yeah, it is very easy to accommodate in the pre-primary class, because it means using multimodal input, using videos, stories, songs and rhymes, experiments as well, and also working with the help of a language assistant. It is usually the case in Spain, right? So try to make the most of a language assistant so that they can bring their own culture onto the class, right? Very important, and I need this this slide, which I love, from our dearest colleague Teresa, right, about scaffolding in CLIL. Scaffolding in CLIL is essential, but scaffolding in CLIL in pre-primary levels is more than essential. Some ideas to introduce scaffolding, helping them out in the process, could be the language skills being embedded in all content areas, not just in the foreign language, not just in English, French, whatever language we're trading with. Trying to introduce as well these practices that she mentions to support listening and speaking in the class, and also trying to prepare them for subsequent imagined reading activities and writing activities. The fact that we are not asking kids to produce reading or writing at this very basic stage does not mean that we cannot be preparing them for later future. That many activities such as placing accent on syllables, clapping musical rhythms, using music, and so on. Okay, and as for the main challenges, I would like to mention when trying to implement this CLIL approach into the primary education levels, I would like to focus more, very specifically on the need of teacher training, yeah, for every quality program, not just a CLIL program, but every quality program we want to implement. Teachers should be trained to recognize children's developmental stage, to know about CLIL and how this CLIL approach could be transformed, could be adapted or tailored to adapt to suit the level we're dealing with, to respect these essential characteristics of the level. They also need to know how to adapt the syllabus. Yeah, well, today there's also some many important publishing houses which are venturing to adapt and to produce new materials for the CLIL pre-primary approach. Yeah, but we also need to have a closer look at the syllabus, at the curriculum, depending on the country or the context we're working in, so that we can have a well-designed curriculum which is respecting kids at this stage. Of course, as in any implementation of an approach, we would need appropriate resources, adequate policies by institutions. So we need to be in constant communication with the upper levels and asking about the things we need. And for sure, we need supporting parents and supporting families. And supporting parents does mean that we telling parents the truth about bilingual education programs, especially more specifically the truth about kids becoming bilingual, kids learning in other languages, what it implies, what is true, what is false, so that we can avoid possible misconceptions in the topic. And that's all on my part. I think I tried to adjust to the to my time, right? If you have any questions, I would be glad to answer them.
Yeah, well, Anna, thank you so much for this inspiring presentation and talk. I think you really dealt with the most important issues regarding how to adapt this CLIL methodology approach into the pre-primary classroom. So thank you so much for that. And now it's we have the second talk. If you have questions, comments, whatever, please write them in the chat and we can discuss them after the full talks. Okay, so we have time after that. Now it's the time for our colleague from Italy, Dr. Olivia Mer. The title of her presentation is CLIL and Early Childhood Education, an International Overview. And Olivia is a research fellow in the Faculty of Language Science and Foreign Literature, and the Center of Higher Education Internationalization at Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore in Milan. Her research interests include English medium instruction, content and language integrated learning, and early foreign language learning, as well as internationalization of higher education. She has taught English language to children of all ages from preschool to high school. So her international and school experience is a wonderful asset for this talk. Thank you very much, Olivia, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Beatriz, for the very kind introduction, and thank you to you and Mila for inviting me to take part in this webinar on a topic that I really feel very strongly about and have been involved in as a researcher for the last 5 or so years. Okay, I've been asked to give an international overview, which is quite a big challenge in 15 minutes, but I'll do my best. I'd like to begin with an overview of what I see are the main issues, and then I'd like to provide some snapshots of CLIL and early childhood education in a few different contexts, so with 3 to 6-year-olds. So I'm not going to be talking about so much the earlier age group, but 3 to 6-year-olds in preschool contexts. Okay, so a question I'm often asked, and I've had talks with some of you about this at conferences and online, is can CLIL take place without subject-based learning? I'll come back to that in a minute. A question of definitions and labels. What distinguishes CLIL from other forms of bilingual education, such as immersion or foreign language instruction at this level? And we find the term soft CLIL used in relation to CLIL and early childhood education, and I'll consider whether that's suitable or not. The rationale for CLIL, well, we know that CLIL emerged in a European context in 1990s with the aim of promoting multilingualism and multiculturalism and helping Europeans become citizens who could live and work in a global multicultural society. Of course, over time, the rationale has changed and it's spread beyond Europe. So I'll give a couple of brief examples from beyond Europe, even though most of my knowledge is about European contexts. A big issue is, of course, that there is a lack of a legislative framework and policy relating to early childhood education and CLIL, and there are a few country or centralised guidelines. There are some guidelines, though, available. Okay, the profile of the CLIL early childhood education teacher, this is a main issue. As Anna just pointed out, the care aspect is very important and we must not overlook the affective dimension. So this is an important issue. And of course, it is often the generalist, the preschool or early childhood education teacher who is teaching content through the CLIL language, which is foreign language or additional language, and maybe with the support of a language specialist or a language assistant. And one big issue is the lack of data from classrooms. We have some research mainly focusing on implementation and teacher education, and the implementation projects show the teachers and children's perspectives, but we don't know much about what goes on in a CLIL early childhood education classroom. Okay, so in answer to the question, can CLIL take place without subject-based learning? Well, I really believe that it can, because preschool education is content-rich and often a modular theme-based approach is used in CLIL. So it does not have to be, content does not have to be part of a discrete curriculum discipline. So even though there's no subject learning, there's a lot of content to work with. Okay, we find the terms soft CLIL and hard CLIL used, and soft CLIL describes lower exposure approaches, including CLIL showers. And showers, as Anna said, are a kind of micro immersion in which children are exposed to the foreign language through short daily bursts, and this is considered appropriate for the level. The problem with the term soft CLIL is it's also often defined as being language driven, and we know that in CLIL theory that the content should be the starting point. So the areas of experience to be the modular area to be covered in the educational setting should be the starting point for planning. It should not be language objectives in the way foreign language learning is focusing on language. So I sometimes think that that's a little bit problematic, even though I'm in favor of an inclusive approach. And hard CLIL is used to define when the curriculum, a larger percentage, up to 50%, is taught through the foreign language. We know that what differentiates CLIL from immersion is that CLIL is often the teacher and the children share the same language, whereas in immersion contexts we have a community language being used and perhaps the teachers are native speakers of the languages. So it's often quite different on that basis. In Europe, a CLIL approach is adopted in mainstream education for 3 to 6 year olds, but it's not well documented in research. So this is one of the major challenges. And CLIL projects at this level are often self-activated by single schools or groups of schools, heads of school, teachers, and even parents and the school community. So they're the result of individual initiatives. As I said, there's no legislative framework regarding implementation as far as I'm aware. If anyone has any different information, please let me know. It is mentioned, however, by a number of researchers as being suitable for this age group, and it's even mentioned by some policymakers, as in the case of the former education minister in Italy, who defined it as a suitable approach, but didn't actually explain how it should be adopted. Okay, so as Anna emphasised, CLIL approach at early childhood education level must integrate language learning with play-based, experiential and social learning, taking into account all of the needs of the child and planning around themes or content areas. So these may include nature learning, early STEM learning, aspects such as the 4 seasons and learning about the world around them. It should take into account the local context and the educational priorities. Okay, in Europe, an early Eurydice report from 15 years ago mentioned that there were pilot projects at preschool level in Belgium, Spain, Italy, Slovakia and Scotland. But since then, not a lot more research has been carried out, although a lot of projects have been established. There are no statistics regarding the extent and details of CLIL programs in Europe, as far as I'm aware. Okay, so I'd like to give some quick snapshots of a few countries. In Cyprus, so far the biggest research was carried out, and it involved 10 pre-primary schools. So this is pre-primary is talking about 5-year-olds, so it's a separate year, not involving the younger children, but it's a separate year, and it's also the official starting age for early language learning. And this project involved implementation and 15 teachers in-service training and 550 children, and it gathered the perspectives of teachers and children, a large number of them. And also out of the Pro-CLIL project emerged some recommendations for CLIL, and these are still very useful for any school or community wishing to establish CLIL at a school. I can't mention CLIL without talking about Spain, because Spain is recognised as a key player in the CLIL landscape, and this is due to both widespread implementation of CLIL across school levels from university down, and also high research output. So some fantastic research comes out of Spain. And already in 1999, CLIL was being used with 3 to 6-year-olds. But there hasn't been a huge amount of documentation with this age group since then. Most research focuses on the pre-service teacher education. And this seems to suggest that teachers need to be prepared to use CLIL because it is actually really widespread, but we don't know a huge amount about what goes on in those classrooms. I'm sure some of my Spanish colleagues know a lot more than I do, because you're working with the children and involved in implementation. And so maybe there's some research out there that I haven't come across, but some research I can share with you from Spain. We can see teachers, pre-service and in-service teachers, applying the 4 C's framework to early childhood education. We have, in one case, student teachers engaged in planning storytelling activities and thinking carefully about the cognitive demands and engaging lower order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills. In another study, there's a proposal for teaching children about the life cycle of plants using 5-minute episodes of the series Peppa Pig. So using audio-visual affordances. The most recent study in the Spanish context considers the extent to which pre-service preschool teachers feel prepared to teach in CLIL settings, and results show that teachers did not feel sufficiently prepared for the CLIL classroom. Okay, so in Italy, well, Italy adopted official CLIL policy through the reform of its secondary school system over 10 years ago, and it is being introduced on a high school down basis. So in high school, the teaching of a non-linguistic subject is compulsory in the final year, in the 5th year of high school. And English is the language used. In 2014, a national preschool survey revealed that 85% of all preschools had some form of foreign language instruction or awareness of other languages. And this includes CLIL type programs, although they're not often labelled that way. Okay, so I'll share with you briefly a project that I was involved with. It involved 3 preschool classes, 4 in-service teachers and 75 children aged 3 to 6 years in 2 northern Italian preschools. And this research provides insights from classroom observation, as well as teachers and children's voices. So teachers in this project implemented CLIL using the 4 seasons as a thematic area. They used songs, storytelling, guided play, games, and physical activity, as well as creating a CLIL area. That means a play area where all the material was available to stimulate spontaneous play among children. And we gathered some evidence from the classroom, and you can see in this example, the teacher and the children engaged in a kind of dress-up game of trying on different clothing items, and the teacher says, "Where do you put your scarf? Around your belly?" And the children say no. And the teacher supports the language that they've been learning so far, and the children are engaged in the game. Okay, so we probably need more evidence of this nature. Finland, I will just mention very quickly because my colleagues are going to share their very interesting experiences with us, but Holmila recently in some ethnographic research highlighted the way the teaching context has changed and is becoming in an increasingly multicultural and multilingual setting due to immigration, and now there are a high number of Finnish L2 children. So that's something that needs to be taken into account in regards to teacher cognition and how they think about this. Okay, a couple of examples from outside Europe. In China, there's a big overlap between integrated English and CLIL. In China, the target of bilingual education is mostly to improve English learning. So integrated English is kind of intended to remedy the failures of traditional EFL. It promotes the pedagogical and psychological aspects, not just the linguistic aspects, much like CLIL, and it is applied in experimental kindergarten. So I found some research that it refers to CLIL and IE interchangeably, and these projects have been very successful and attracted a lot of attention from media and the public and parents in particular, who, as we know, are very important in early language education. In Australia, this is an interesting case because of the languages used. In primary school, they're using Mandarin Chinese, Indonesian, Japanese, and Korean in primary CLIL. And in the state of Victoria, since 2018, they've had early childhood languages teaching for 3 to 5-year-olds, and about 10 of the 160 services I'm familiar with seem to fit the description of CLIL, and in my conversations with researchers there, they seem to agree on this, even though it's not necessarily labelled this way. It's present in a number of countries. I'm at least aware of Argentina, Brazil, and Colombia, but again, I'm afraid to say I'm not aware of a great deal of research regarding 3 to 6-year-olds, so please let me know if you have anything to share. Okay, so looking to the future, we need clear definitions. We need to think about whether CLIL really does promote the original aim of plurilingualism, because of course English is the language mostly used in CLIL projects. So we need more CLIL programs involving major international languages, including the languages of immigration, and we also need minority languages. It would be great to read more about projects using other languages. There's a need for a legislative framework to support implementation with clear guidelines for teacher education. And of course, as far as research is concerned, we need to evaluate the success of content and language learning by looking at classroom discourse, and this is an underexplored area. And as part of that, we could consider translanguaging and the different resources children are using to make meaning in the classroom. And of course, observation of play, ways in which talk is scaffolded through the use of visuals, gesture, repetition, and correct modeling, stimulating curiosity in new words, and the use of music and rhyme. So finally, I'll leave you with the question, can CLIL be seen as a driver for quality education? Well, I would argue that it can be seen as a driver for quality education because when it is done properly, it engages teachers in some very deep reflection. It involves very lengthy and careful planning processes, thinking about the integration of language and content in planning. And it is about very much co-constructed learning. So it is underpinned by the same principles as a lot of early education pedagogical approaches. So I do think it has the potential to be a driver for quality education. Thank you again for the opportunity to present.
Thank you so much, Olivia, for this inspiring presentation, because you have really, you have done a great job synthesizing so many experiences and projects and experiences that are going on in different parts of the world. And that I think you really get to the point. Amazing. I have now, we are running a little bit of time, so I'm now going to pass to our last speaker, Angela Alvarez Cofinho. Apart from being my friend, although she is not here for being my friend, she's here because she's a really leading expert in CLIL here in Spain. Angela holds a PhD in English studies. She is an English teacher at both pre-primary and primary stages in Oviedo, Spain, and has been working through CLIL for the past 18 years. She's also a professor at Master in Bilingual Education at the University of Nebrija here in Spain, and she's author of ELT materials for Oxford University Press. So as you can imagine, she has lots of experience with kids and how to implement CLIL in the pre-primary classroom. So Angela, it's a pleasure to have you here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Bea. Well, today what I'm going to talk about is the classroom experience, all right? And since we have seen that many people said that there is not a lot of research on what's going on, well, there is a lot of research, but the problem is that I think that the majority of teachers who are in the classrooms nowadays, we don't have really much time left to write about all the results of the research we do, because it takes some time and there's a lot of things we have to do and prepare for our children in class. So what I do really, I'm bringing to you today is my classroom. So I'm going to show you some examples of the kinds of CLIL things we do in class on a daily basis, right, every day. First of all, I want you to focus on the context I'm working at. I work as Bea said, at a state school in the north of Spain, right? It is located in a deprived area of the city where I live in Oviedo. And the school is made of, from primary education and pre-primary education. Those of you who are not familiar with the Spanish education system, just to let you know that pre-primary stage is part of the whole education system, that the formal education system. Although it is not obligatory for students, families decide if they want to send children to school, to pre-primary school. And the majority, that is around 95, 6-7% of the Spanish students, of the Spanish children, attend pre-primary stage in schools around Spain. So mine is a state school that is run by state, is completely free for students. And we have slight percentage of ethnic minorities in the school belonging to the Romani group, all right? And their main problem is the high level of absenteeism that they present. That is, they are absent the majority of times, so it's very difficult for us to run a normal rhythm or a normal pace in the lessons with them. So this is why we have to repeat and revisit a lot of things to try to catch, to help them catch up with what we're doing. The children in pre-primary stage are from 3 to 6, so they start English at the age of 3, right? Straightforward when they go to school. And as you said before, in the pre-primary curriculum, there are no subjects as such, but there are 3 main working areas, which is the communication and representation. Here we deal with everything that has to do with language, with maths, with arts. That is what in the curriculum, in the primary curriculum, would appear as these subjects. We integrate them here in this area. Then the second area is the knowledge and the world around us, having to do with social studies, history, geography, science, ICTs, etc., etc. And then the personal autonomy that has to do with movement, with physical education, with dance, with the ability that, and skills that children have to get in order to be able to be autonomous in their life. The groups are made up of around 25 children each, right? And there is only 1 teacher per group. There are no teacher assistants at all. There are only some what we call support teachers that go around each pre-primary classroom several hours a week. So depending on how big the school is and how many of these support teachers we have, they can go up to 2 or 3 sessions per week to help class teachers, but they don't help English teachers, because the English teachers are English specialists who usually go or enter the classroom once, twice, or 3 times per week, again, depending on the schools, right? What we do in our school, we have 8 sessions of English per week from the age of 3, right? Ours is a school within a special bilingual agreement between the British Council and the Spanish Ministry of Education. So children have 8 sessions a week in English at the pre-primary stage, and then they have around 10 or 11 when they get into the primary level, right? I must say that what we do with the pre-primary kids is working through projects. So we do CLIL project work. So because through CLIL project work, we can integrate all the different 3 areas that I told you about into our daily work, into our daily job, right? So the first things we have is to negotiate topics with students. How do we do that? Obviously, we cannot negotiate everything starting from scratch, because otherwise it could be a complete madness, and we would have to prepare things on the go, really. So what we do is the year before, we plan several projects that we offer as students, all right? We offer them chances to choose among the different projects we prepare for them. All the projects start or have as the core a storybook. All right, so we decide the topic we are going to work with, for example, plants. So the storybook we are going to use is Jack and the Beanstalk, for example. So that is going to be the starting point of the whole project. So since Jack and the Beanstalk has to do with plants, and with all elements having to do with, or all content having to do with the growth of plants, the different parts of plants, etc., we start our projects from a storybook, and then from the storybook we develop the whole project, in which we integrate all the different areas or big areas that we have to implement in pre-primary education. The first thing we do when we start the project is elicit from children the prior knowledge. That is, I need to know from them what things they already know about the project, to not insist again on things that are obvious or the things that they already know. So when I know more or less what they already know, I ask them, okay, you already know this. What would you like to know? What more things would you like to know about this topic? And then I prepare a couple of lists with the things they already know and the things they would like to know. And those 2 lists go onto the project wall. So we make sure that after every session, we do a plenary. And in the plenary, we reflect on the things we have learned. So we go to this panel, or to this project wall, and there we tick all those questions or all those things we would like to know about the project. And we consider that a project is finished when we are able to answer all those things they would like to know or to discover about the project. And as you see there in the picture, for example, we were talking about a project on potatoes. So what I took to class was a real potato, and just sat in front of my children, put the potato sorry, opposite them, so they can see my face well. I showed them the potato and I just let them talk. Some of them knew a little bit of language because this was done with 5-year-olds, because since they started when they were 3, they already knew some language. So they mixed up some language, some others used only Spanish. So what I did was recasting and repeating everything they said in Spanish and English in order for them to start becoming familiar with the structures and the vocabulary we were going to use. So this artifact, which sometimes is a real object, sometimes is an artifact, a toy, etc., is going to be like the ignition or the ignition point for hooking children or tuning children into the topic we are going to deal with. The good thing about CLIL project work is that CLIL allows us to do this kind of projects in a cross-curricular way, because we can integrate all these areas I told you about before, using English as the vehicular language. All right. One of the things that we have to work with as students is literacy. All right. So what we do is, as you have there, many different ways. Everything very manipulative, as Olivia said before, and I think she also said that. Very manipulative, very sensorial, because we want that everything they do in class is memorable later on, and that they can remember that for the rest of their lives. So the more senses they put in what they do, the better they will remember that. Right? So as you see there, we work with all manipulatives, and all the vocabulary that we have to work in class, always beginning with CVC words, consonant, vowel, consonants, is linked to the topic that we are working at the moment. It could be solar system, planets. We do we have another one about elephants, starting from the storybook of Elmer, tropical fruits and savanna animals in Hand of Surprise. So everything is connected with this storybook I told you about, right? The good thing about working with these manipulatives is that children become very, very autonomous. So the children don't have the teacher doesn't have to be all the time with them. I give them the different tasks they have to do, and they have all the material in there. So what I do is just go around the classroom monitoring how they do and if they do any correctly or not. As you can see, these are 5-year-olds. 5-year-olds start writing properly in English, all right, making mistakes or whatever. But that is part of the natural learning process. But they start properly reading and writing at the age of 5. As some of you said before, I think it was also Olivia, this aspect of the challenge, all right. So we begin with more. Less complex activities, which or tasks which little become more complex, up to the moment, for example, in which children, as you can see in the picture at the left, have only pictures, and from their prior knowledge of the things we have worked in class, they have to be able to spell the words correctly using, for example, the alphabet you have in there. Okay, so again, to work on literacy, for example, we start with synthetic phonics from the age of 3. Obviously, when they are 3, we don't do any reading or writing at all. We experiment and we play with the sounds, training their ears for the sounds of a new system, which is the English phonological system. Then we do also a lot of mathematics in our projects. So, for example, there you have examples of the autumn project having to do with the story Ouch, which also appears in some, because Ouch was the old title of the story. I don't know why they changed it. Now it's called Apple Trouble. So a lot of mathematical activities having to do with other projects we do. Counting, as you see there's a girl working with teen numbers. We don't put any limits, so we don't establish any limits as regards the things they have to learn. Because, for example, I remember when we started teaching in English in infant education, at the age of 3, they said, or they told us, we could only teach colors blue and red and numbers up to 3. So if that were so, I couldn't teach my students, because in my class there are many more colors and many more numbers. In fact, we do a register every day, so we count Swiss in class every day, and we are 25. So this is why we work on teen numbers and all the inputs I can offer them. Another thing that I do a lot with my students, as you can see on the very left bottom photograph is working on fine motor skills, because one of the things that we have to bear in mind, especially this kid was a 3-year-old, it is, well, he is there linking or relating numbers with ciphers, all right, and or quantity, sorry, and he's also using tweezers. I don't know if you can see them, because he's working on fine motor skills, because this is going to be very important for later on when they start writing with the proper pencils. Then we work on, as you have already mentioned, a lot of experimentation, a lot of STEM, a lot of experiments, and again, things having to do with history, like monuments of the world, like, for example, dinosaurs, in which they were paleontologists having to excavate for dinosaur bones and then relating the skeletons to the real dinosaurs. For example, in the area of literacy here in this project, we introduce, or we work with the comparative and the superlative. Of course, no grammar at all, but use of the language, because it was necessary to compare the dinosaurs. Or in geography, they've learned things like the difference between an island and a lake, and how the lake can be the positive and the island the negative as a kind of, if you had a stone and you divided it into two, how the print of one is going to be a lake, and the negative is going to be the lake, for example. They've learned about different countries in the world, different continents, and all, as I said before, in a very manipulative way. And as you can see there, they have their cards in which they can check what they are doing. So they can self-correct themselves, and they don't have to come to me all the time when they finish an activity to see if it is correctly or not. So they become very autonomous, because they know that they can ask me any question they have, or ask me for help, but they are able to self-correct themselves with all the material that I prepare for them. In science, as you said, what we do is a lot of experimentation, going out, picking up leaves, then cutting up the leaves and poor leaves, destroying them to find out the different parts of the leaf. Obviously, they are not allowed to use tear leaves from the trees we have in the orchard. And a lot of experiments that you have in there, like sinking, floating. It depends on the storybook we deal with. Different kind of experiments and STEM comes out. Then we do also ICTs, but I must confess that my children are not very keen on ICTs these days. And I think that is because they are so exposed to tablets, mobile phones, television, etc., that in my school, my kids prefer to play. So that is what we do the majority of the time, all right? So we do ICT only from time to time. I don't care about what the ministry says, or if they tell me off, because we have to do this digitalization programs, etc. But I prefer my kids to play, because they are not used to playing nowadays at home. The majority of them are not used to play, so they are rediscovering games and playing class. And then in physical education, for example, you have there, in the case of the plants, we do one of the things that we do a lot in our project is repeating the same content once and again, but in different ways, so they don't get bored. And then this way I can cater for all the different multiple intelligences and the learning styles that I've got in class. So there, for example, they are representing with the body the growth of a plant as a part of the physical education lesson, which has not to be necessarily doing or playing a sport. And then we also involved art. So every lesson or every project involves a lot of different art activities, usually art crafts, not only painting or coloring, but things that they have to manipulate and do with the hands, again, triggering for fine motor skills.
Angela, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we are running a bit out of time. So if you can,
yeah, okay.
I know you're doing it very quick, but
right. I'm going to finish with the personal autonomy, right? In which you see how children, again, are developing their personal creativity, using or developing fine motor skills, and working either, as you see, in groups or independently, but the majority of times, except this year because of the COVID situation, they socialize in small groups, and they are allowed to do activities that they can share. So not everybody has to work independently all the time. Although there are some activities and tasks that they can do independently if they decide, because not all children like to be working with another person all the time, all right? Especially at these ages in which children are quite selfish and they prefer to do things on their own. So I'm going to finish here. So this was just for you to have an idea of the kind of CLIL activities we do in class. Everything in English from the very first moment, right? And well, what we get when they finish at the age of 5 is a really high level of comprehension, lower level of output, sorry, because the production level is not very high yet. But when they get to year 6, we see the progression, and well, a holistic development, not only having to do with the curricular areas, but also in the language and also in motor skills.
Thank you so much, Angela, because you have really given us the insights of the classroom, and it has been fantastic to see so many ideas and examples that we can really and it's really fascinating, as some colleagues was doing in the chat, saying that it is fantastic to see that children prefer playing rather than all the things. So for me, it's really a challenge now to synthesize all the interesting things that has been said in this webinar. So I think we don't have much time, so we may have like 15 minutes of discussion. Anyone that wants to talk, and then I will encourage you to please keep at least 5 or 10 minutes more, because Mila and I have lots of announcements, interesting announcements to do. So when we finish the discussion. So if anyone wants to talk or want to ask some questions or comment anything, please feel free. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I think we will upload the video and try to share some documents from the presentation, or at least some references.
And now, do we have questions that have been sent?
I have sent to Bea.
Okay.
Yeah, your
I
phone,
don't. I can't see much questions, but I think there was a comment about collaboration among teachers. I think this is one of the key issues that we need to take into account, that how to deal with teacher training and who should be in charge of the CLIL pre-primary classroom, which is a really hot topic on that. I don't know if anyone wants to discuss about this or talk, explain further, or I think Julie has raised her hand. So Julie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Beatriz. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the speakers. What an amazing. Oh, sorry, just 1 second. Now, nobody calls all day and they decide to ring me now. Sorry.
These things happen, don't worry.
Yeah, what an amazing variety and scope. Really, really, really interesting to have these different visions and this international perspective, and then to finish hearing from a teacher. It was fabulous to have this kind of these different perspectives. And I had a question from the very beginning, from Anna's presentation, which in each presentation the question kind of developed, and the question would be about what you consider, what you think about the need for and the scope of training, teacher training. But I'm particularly thinking about legislation. Okay, because it's something that concerns me quite a bit. I'm speaking to you from Catalonia, so I'm speaking to you in the context of having talked to many teachers who've tried to get onto CLIL courses and they've not been able to, and that causes them stress because they feel that they have to. But also talking to pre-service teachers in university, they start by thinking that there's not enough in the curriculum, and this worries them, the fact that they don't get enough orientation in the curriculum. Whereas what we've heard from Finland, there seems this emphasis on not having a unified way is a real benefit there. And then finishing up with Angela's incredible presentation on the REYLL experience, how fantastic to hear a teacher say, well, I can see this is working, so whatever the legislators say to me. And so I think that this question about legislation, to what extent do we need more legislation, and how could it actually be counterproductive to over-legislate?
Okay, well, thank you so much, Yuli, for the inspiring and interesting question. I could be talking whole afternoon about this because there's so much to say. Well, first, referring to the teacher's profile, I am aware that many universities right now do require some CLIL instruction on the part of the learners, but I have a feeling that the CLIL is not really integrated into is not really like something they feel they could do, because the curriculum in Spain, I'm talking about the context I know the best, right? But it might be the case that we are not used to having an integrated curriculum, regardless if it is a bilingual or a monolingual one. And maybe that's the thing. But this is my personal view. And as well, as they see that they can do a CLIL subject, or they pursue some postdoc in bilingual education, and then they go to the regular class in Spain, and they don't see teachers working with other teachers, subjects being integrated with other subjects. Even the languages are not integrated on their own, or they are integrated in pre-primary education when everything is so holistic, but when they arrive to primary and secondary education, everything is like separated into different boxes. This is language, this is L1, but maybe it's Spanish, student's mother tongue, this is English, this is French, this is mathematics, this is, and maybe that's why, because we don't have this mindset about integrating things in a holistic way. That's one thing. And also, I believe that we would need a different entry exam for pre-service teachers, for teachers accessing state education. I mean, when they enter the institutions, when they have these oposiciones, when they need to have these entry exams, they prepare for monolingual context and not for bilingual context. And again, what they have studied is not really implemented in real practice. So we need to change the system. And I would start by asking the policymakers for specific profiles for language teachers. This is something that Beatriz, my colleague and friend Beatriz, can talk volumes about that. Maybe because we need, as she always says, a specific profile for language teaching in primary education to start with, and then also specific teaching profile for bilingual education. Or maybe we could try to change monolingual education, but in a way that it is going to be more integrated. I don't know if I've answered your question. This is a very interesting topic.
It is actually. Well, you know, I research on that. So, I mean, as I see it, I can say something. The problem is that here, that at least in Spain and in many similar countries, we don't train our English teachers to work in pre-primary education. And on top of that, we don't train them, or not most of them, to work on CLIL. So when, you know, a teacher, an English teacher, has to get into a pre-primary classroom, and on top of that, it's a bilingual pre-primary classroom. You know, for them, it's like a madness, and they don't really know what to do. And sometimes, not always, because here we have lots of wonderful examples of doing it right, but sometimes they do it wrongly. And this is the problem with CLIL. I think we need to, when we proposed this webinar, and when we started working on this issue on pre-primary CLIL, the thing was that we know lots of teachers, and they were coming to us saying, listen, I want to do this, but how can I do it in pre-primary? Because I do it in primary, but how can I do it in pre-primary? And we start saying we need to think about that, because it's a reality that's going on in school. So we really need to give, as researchers, and we need to give them the clues on how to really implement properly CLIL in pre-primary classroom, because it's completely different as you will do it in the primary one. And here we have seen a wonderful examples in Finland, and also with Angela's class. So I think we have here two wonderful examples. I don't know if our colleagues from Finland want to say something else about teacher education and how they cope with it.
I think, Beatriz, maybe we need to, okay. Ioannou, please.
I was just asking, do you want to say something, Joe?
We can maybe both respond from slightly different perspectives, because I think it's also a challenge here in Finland as well that we've not quite yet worked out, that subject teachers, so trained to be as language teachers, it isn't always easy for them to then go and work with the young children. Although we have had many projects now that have provided funding for subject teachers to go into daycares and preschools and to do language showering with the children. And we've recently at our university established a language aware and multilingual pathway, which brings together early childhood educators, class teachers and subject teachers. So although they've still got their main studies in the different sort of departments of the university, they do quite a lot together. So this is a way of trying to establish teacher collaboration as a natural part of the teacher repertoire, that we do collaborate, and those that specialise in language can also work with those that have a good understanding of young children and share their practices and insights and find new ways of working together. So that's a quick answer, but it's not a full answer, because it's similarly, I think, complicated here. Ioannou, would you like to add?
Yeah, maybe just a few thoughts. I think earlier in early childhood educator training, there was very little topics related to language, but we are now really developing that area. So there are coming more and more training to this, and also in service training. So there is a growing amount of training, and I realize that more will be needed also. So it's good that they are developing that. And maybe just one thought for the pedagogical freedom, that it is so high in Finland, the degree of pedagogical freedom, because we have this research-based early childhood teacher training. So the teachers hold high qualifications, even those working with the early years or children in the early years. So that's maybe one thing that it's important to notice, that it might be one reason why it works quite well to have this freedom.
Great.
We don't have much time, but maybe 5 more minutes if it's okay. Or Mila, what you wanted to say?
First of all, I think that the issue of professional development in early language education is not only the headache of CLIL, but is in general headache of all domains of early language education, heritage language, minority language, and etc., etc. So I think that we will discuss it within our leading team and we will think how we can address these questions. I think it was a more thorough approach and discussion, separate discussion about what do teachers need to know and how. In terms of their profession, I don't think we have indeed, we can influence step by step. Also at the macro level policy, because we are all educators, we are all researchers and educators, and many of us teach preschool teachers or within in-service or pre-service programs and work in the universities or in the educational colleges with teachers. So we are also power makers at some point of view. So this discussion is very, very essential and needs to be extended, I think so. So do we have time? We have some repeating question about measuring of the results of children's progress. Who can address this question?
Yeah, maybe Angela, you can ask them, because they were asking you some questions in terms of the classroom. They said whether you use English all the time. I know in Finland they showed a flexible model. Maybe we can talk about that. And also there was a question about how to measure the students' progress and all that. Yeah. It says, how do you measure your students' performance? Do you conduct personal evaluation frequently? Okay.
Right, as I'm seeing here, well, first of all, someone asked before, how many projects do we do in a year? Usually we do projects every 2 months, all right? So more or less a whole project takes 2 months. So to develop it completely and, you know, consolidating and anchoring all the content we work in there. As measuring, well, the first way of measuring my children's progression and attainment is their faces, if they're happy or not. That is the most important thing for me. If they are really happy in class, if they feel comfortable, that is the best way for me to know that they are progressing, especially emotionally. And then afterwards, we do, as I said before, plenaries and assemblies in which I ask them questions, everything based on orality, right? So they don't have to do any, we don't do any evaluation or assessment of reading and writing yet in pre-primary. And then I've got a checklist and rubrics in which, well, through questions and doing creative thinking questioning, I see if they are getting or attaining the objectives and understanding the content, etc. Everything we do is in English. I speak to them in English all the time. I only use Spanish, sorry, if it is absolutely necessary. And ones that I've tried many different ways through images, pictures, body language, pointing, whatever, to try to make myself understood in English. So we can say that 99% of the time, my kids are exposed to English in school. And as regards any kind of formal assessment like quizzes or tests, as you are asking there, of course, in pre-primary, not at all.
Yeah, that is basically. Thanks, Angela, because this is what we were talking before about the idiosyncrasies of pre-primary education. So we really need to think about not as a pre-primary teacher, but as a pre-primary teacher. So as most of the time it is language teachers and they are trained more with elder students, then we need to really change that mind and get into a pre-primary classroom, and we cannot really do formal assessment that you were doing and things like that. I don't know if anyone else will want to comment on something.
My personal recommendation for English teachers who would like to work at the pre-primary level, because we haven't been trained for that at the teaching training schools or faculties, is to cooperate a lot or collaborate a lot with pre-primary teachers, with classroom pre-primary teachers, because I've learned a lot from them, much more than any master's or course that you can do at university.
Okay. Anyone wants to comment anything else? If you want to raise your hands, we may have 1 more minute for any comment or anything. Anyone else? Julie says, do you think it's important, Angela, that you understand them when they are probably speaking Spanish? I mean, what would this mean if you were monolingual in English?
Yeah, Julie, absolutely. It's very, very important that the teacher always understand what they say. Otherwise, there is not properly. If you don't understand the language, you cannot show empathy towards towards what they are happy or what they are, how they are feeling, or if you are not understanding exactly what a face they are making to you means. So it's very important that the teacher understands their language. Very important.
Sure. Anyone else?
I mean the language, the mother tongue, the children's mother tongue.
Please, Olivia, go ahead. You want to say?
Yes, I just wanted to comment on the role of the language assistant, and it's often a native language user who's coming in as a visiting language assistant. And in my experience, sometimes this becomes a site of conflict because perhaps the school decides that because this person speaks the CLIL language very well, they don't need to take part in training. And this person doesn't have the pedagogical preparation for specifically 3 to 6 year olds. And the teachers therefore feel that they're kind of going at loggerheads. So the teachers are trying to do something, they're not being supported properly by the language assistant who is visiting. Maybe they have conflict over the materials used because one of them uses a book that the other one uses as well, and they're not integrated and united in their approach. So I think that in training, in teacher education, it's very important to include the language assistants and the general, the early childhood education specialists, so that they can benefit from each other's knowledge and work together in planning and properly integrating the project. And that includes assessment, which can include kind of game-based evaluation. So evaluation through games like sorting games and putting things into categories with teaching children, demonstrating engagement through games as one way of evaluating their progress.
Sure, Olivia. I think you are completely right. Anyone else want to, I don't know, maybe we can close, Mila, and give our announcement so that.
Okay, Bia, would you like to start with the conference, or would you like to start with my stuff?
You can start and then we leave the conference for the end. Is it okay?
Okay, so first of all, thank you, dear Beatriz, for this great preparation and for this insight, for all insights and for all thoughts that we are just processing, just thinking about. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Fatma. And I would like to thank all presenters. It's our pleasure and honor to listen to you and to learn from you. So my colleague, thank you so much. It was great. Big success, brief, concise, and insightful. Thank you. And I think that we need to discuss, we still need to discuss issues related to the teachers' professional development, and also this question of parents and parents' involvement within CLIL, and also in general within early language education, was our discussion, for the discussion. So I would like to start from congratulations to, can you see my sharing? Yes?
Yes.
Congratulations to our former conveners, Gunhild Arnstad from Norway, from at the University of Hamar, and also to Sandy Mourao from the University of Novo University in Lisbon.
Portugal, yeah, Lisbon.
Portugal. Both Gunhild and Sandy established this 6 special interest group, Multilingual Childhoods, in 2015. And indeed, we are grateful for their endless, tireless investment in this project. And Bea and I continue this project, and we feel honored to continue leading this special interest group. And I would like to present you the result, outcome of their efforts in gathering us together, that has been just published, special issue in the European Early Childhood Educational Research Journal, special issue devoted to multilingual education in early childhood, and in particular with the stress on transdisciplinary research field, early childhood language education, early language education as a transdisciplinary research field. Many our members, active members, published in the special issue. It's diverse, fascinating, novel, and I'm going to stress it again and again. We are all engaged in very novel research domain. Still, we know few about early language education. It's a novel research domain, just in terms of it's emerging, it's in the emergent stage, and I think it's great that all we are engaged in this field as an emerging field. And the special issue stresses that we are still in the process of development, and there are more questions than answers. So it's the first special issue that I would like to share with you that has been published, and I suggest you to read papers from this special issue. And I would like also to invite you to participate in our new project that will engage many of our members. I would like to engage you in participation in a project, new special issue that our research organizing leading team initiated. The name of this special issue, researching about and with multilingual children as agents in early language learning. The special issue is planned to be published in the International Journal of Bilingual Education and Bilingualism. Our focus will be specifically on our children, preschool children from 0 to 6, in some contexts from 0 to 7, like in the former Soviet Union and in Finland, for example. We are talking about children's perspectives on early language learning, exploring these perspectives, exploring children's beliefs about language learning, ideas about language learning, how they perceive themselves, their early self or identity development within early language education. We are talking about diversity of contexts. It can be endangered languages, it can be French immersion, it can be Swedish immersion, it can be CLIL, it can be heritage language education. We are talking also about the diversity of the research methodology, and in particular, we are interested in the new ways of exploring children's voices and the new approaches to approach children and to engage them in the research and to collect data from children, from young children. So our focus will be on the following questions. You can see these questions, in particular, how to conduct research with young children about their experience, early language and cultural experience, because language is part of the culture and we can't distinguish in many cases between language and culture. And we are talking about multilingualism and multiculturalism, how children perceive their language-based agency, how can we define language-based agency, what happens with children who don't want to be engaged in early language learning also. And also we are interested in the ethics issues, ethics approach towards early language learning, how to address these issues during our research. So we ask for extended abstracts up to 1,000 words, and the deadline is the end of August. We have at least more than 2 months for submission, and we will notify about acceptance at the end of October, and then we ask to submit a full article till at the end of March 2022. What is important to say that, and to say frankly, is that it will take time to publish this issue. I'm a very realistic person. I know that it takes time for the publisher to publish. We agreed with the Professor Li Wei to publish, first of all, online version of the special issue, because it takes at least 3 years to publish hard copy. So there's no hard copy to publish. So we are going, first we're going to publish the online version, and it will take at least 2 years for us to run this project, because we would like to be highly professional and selective. So just to be on the same page and to frankly to show you what are our perspective, and you're welcome to submit your proposals, your extended abstracts. If you have some questions, please.
Thanks, Mila. Thank you very much.
So we have another announcement.
Yeah, we have plenty of announcements. So, well, first, thanks it's for me a pleasure to continue the work that Gunghil and Sandy has done so far, and that Mila has been engaged for the last year. So it's for me an honor to be part of this committee now and governing the SIG. So we hope we can meet your expectations. And so that I don't extend further, it's a real pleasure for me. I mean, today is the 22nd of June, 2021. And in a year time, just a year time, we hope we can see you all in Granada in our conference after the post-COVID conference. So we hope really we can do it. It's going to be a hybrid event, but we hope we can. I'm going to share my screen to show you some information about the conference we are preparing. So just 1 second. This is not, okay. So it's called the ELME Conference 2022. It's called International Hebrew Conference, Future Challenges in Early Language Learning and Multilingual Education. The website you've got there is not really available right now, but it will be very soon, okay? We've got thematic strands that covers all kind of early language learning, early language teaching, multilingual education, and so on. But it has to do with children from 0 to 12 years old, and we cover all type of socio-linguistic contexts. So we are quite inclusive in that way. Then organizers, well, the University of Granada is organizing it, but it's a joint conference by Multilingual Childhood Research Network and Early Language Learning Island Research Network as well. This is Granada. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's a wonderful, beautiful city. We have hot keynote speakers such as Ofelia Garcia. She will be talking about multilingualism, multiversal, and translanguaging. Then we have Fernando Trujillo, one of our most well-known keynote speakers, and he's professor here at the University of Granada. So he will be talking about innovation in teacher education. We've got Janet Neve, who is the founding member of the REYLL. We've got Marisa Perez Cañado, as you know her, she's a high research scholar. And it's going to be a hybrid format, so we will have both on-site and online modes, but we will really love to see you all in Granada. So we expect that we have a high attendance in Granada, okay? We've got diverse academic programs with keynotes, roundtables, posters, individual papers, self-organized symposia, pet talks, more specific for teachers. They want to tell their experiences. We will have garden coffees with keynotes and plenaries, and we've got also material showcases. We expect to have a memorable social program in Granada, visiting the Alhambra and many other fun activities. And we're gonna launch the call for papers very soon. It will be on our website, and we will send through the different mailing lists that we've got. So by the end of this month, we will be sending the call for papers. And that's it. I have been quick and brief, so waiting for you in Granada in our REYLL conference, okay? So I think, Mila, I don't know, I think we are over time. And it has been a pleasure for all of us having you here, sharing this afternoon with us. Thank you very much to our speakers. You've been fascinating. You have really dealt in a very brief time with very hot topics and many interesting insights about CLIL to think about. We will send you a follow-up message to all participants with information about the video recording and the different slides and information about the webinar. And we encourage you to become members of our network so that you are updated with our activities and so on. Thank you all, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye, and thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon.
Bye bye.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
Bye, bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, bye, thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Perfect. Girls, we need to collect some data.
And Anna, can you switch off the video because you were the one
Yes.
recording it?